So the Barbie days are behind me, and it's been a while since I last bought a Barbie doll, but when I was into it, I was so in. Dolls were really expensive back then, so I mostly played with a stunning collection that I inherited from my cousin. It was mostly 80s Barbie dolls, so like peak of the peak. And we also managed to convince our parents to buy us My Scene dolls every now and then. So between the ages of 10 to let's say 13, I can safely say that I played with Barbies at every given opportunity. And it wasn't like, oh my god, Barbie, your hair looks so nice. What did you use? It's the new shampoo. But it was more like, guys, there was an avalanche and Chelsea and Ken were skiing. We need to dig the bodies out before they're torn apart by grizzlies. But wouldn't then Barbie find out that they were having an affair? We can't just leave the bodies to rot. Anyway, because of that, I was very up to date with all of the Barbies that were coming out. And let me tell you, in the 2000s, the clothes, the makeup, the hair, they all ate. There's no better way to describe it. They just knew what they were doing. It is still one of my biggest disappointments in life when I kept thinking, looking at those dolls, I kept thinking that that's what I'm gonna look when I grow up. And by the time I grew up, the fashion already looked like this. But I recently went to a children's toys section in a supermarket and I saw this. So I went to another one in a different country and I witnessed these fashion atrocities.
Well, what the hell, boy?
So my question is, what in the tallest My Scene platform shoes has happened to Barbie fashions? Like, what happened here? Is it illegal to make them look good now? What's the problem? Back in my days, Barbie fashion not only absolutely slapped, it was also incredibly innovative. It experimented with different fabrics, it introduced different textures, it was fun to play with, it was also pretty to look at. Like, have a look at this doll that I owned that had a plastic jacket that you could put your press-on nails in. This is like peak fashion. Who thought of that? Check out the absolute slay that was the aviator Barbie fit. The cuntiness of the Barbie fashion show dolls, the Brat Summer that the Cali Girl dolls were serving. I'm not even brushing the surface of the cultural impact that the 80s and 90s Barbie fashions had on us. The golden era of Barbie fashions, the lifelong aesthetic decisions that we took seeing those Barbies. You're telling me we went from this to this, and we even have to pay more for it. What? I am aghast. I am unwell. I am shocked and appalled. And I don't know what to do with myself. So what happened? I still struggle to understand what happened, to be honest. Like, I'm not gonna give you an explanation because I'm trying to wrap my head around why it went so bad so quickly. But here are my thoughts. So Barbie as a brand has always received all sorts of criticism, mainly about the impact it has on little girls and little children, on a negative body image that it's promoting, on the lack of diversity, on stereotypical portrayal of women. But I will say, out of all the toy brands, Mattel actually have been putting some effort into fixing that, have been putting some effort into positively influencing little children that are playing with Barbies. They've usually responded to criticism pretty well in terms of actually putting in effort to change things. One of those criticisms was surrounding the body type that Barbie was promoting, which is of course rather unrealistic. I personally don't remember myself ever comparing with Barbie or My Scene, mainly because the dolls I was playing with had massive heads and no toes. But I do understand the negative impact it could have on some other children. And another criticism, I'm not sure if it actually had an impact on how Barbie fashion looks nowadays, but maybe it does, was that the dolls were dressed inappropriately for little kids to play with. At least I remember this criticism back from when I was a kid. My dolls were apparently dressed like hookers, so that meant that I'm gonna go and become a hooker one day. And according to some adults or teachers, it just meant that I would want to dress like that as a kid because I would lose grasp on what's considered appropriate for my age. I never really understood this reasoning because, first of all, I knew that my dolls were grown-up women. My dolls had affairs. My dolls lived in villas. My dolls had career, were business women, they were independent, they had lovers. Those were adults. And second of all, how could I ever get those clothes in child sizes anyway? Not to mention, how would I afford them? So that argument never really made sense to me, even as a kid. And also in my weird child Carolina brain, I already understood that doll fashion is not real life fashion. It's like two different departments. Like, dolls are allowed to wear different clothes than you would see in the streets. Now, I don't know if this is where Barbie fashion crisis stems from, because let's call it as it is. It is a crisis. It is a widespread fashion crisis, and someone needs to call it out. But I'm thinking it could be a factor. The main marketing point of Barbie nowadays as a brand is inclusivity and making the dolls as diverse as possible, which is fantastic. I mean, who wouldn't want a doll that looks like them, especially if they look different to everyone else, and maybe struggle with accepting that. When you go to the Mattel website, the dolls are even described like this. It would say curvy blonde girl, or Down syndrome Barbie, or natural hair, prosthetic leg, you know what I mean. Back when I was a kid, you wouldn't even get any descriptions. It would just be like summer tropic island extravaganza, and you did with that what you wanted. So obviously I think it's commendable that they're so committed to diversity, but don't cancel me. It seems like they're so focused on making Barbies in as many human varieties as possible that they keep forgetting what made Barbie special. And what made Barbie special, in my opinion, was this element of fantasy. Like, we all knew they're not meant to be realistic. They're not meant to be 100% representation of what life is like. She had a pink villa. We all knew no one has a pink villa, but it was this element of fantasy that drew us to Barbie in the first place. And I feel like maybe the problem is that these dolls are simply too realistic, and fashion included. Maybe the fashion is just too realistic. It just looks like what we wear, and it's not interesting anymore. And I'm under the impression that if you want Barbies to look good nowadays, you have to be a grown-up. You have to be a grown-up and you have to have money, because if you buy a collector's Barbie, if you buy a Barbie that is a collab with a famous designer, then they look good, then they slay, then they are actually pretty. So basically, the Barbies that are dressed nicely are meant for adults, and the regular, cheaper Barbies that are meant for children, they just don't get that same attention to detail or design. And my beef is not only with the plain, basic designs, but also with the complete lack of accessories. What happened to accessories? I get that the dolls are supposed to be cheap to produce. I'm assuming it might be a choking hazard that they're afraid of, but come on, where are the accessories? So you're telling me not only are the fabrics plain, the patterns of the fabrics are ugly, but you're also telling me we get no belts, we get no hats, we get no earrings, and instead of the fancy high heels that were so good to chew on, we get boring sneakers? Like, that's the whole point. It was the fantasy of high heels that was actually better than real life high heels, as I found out later in life, sadly. Like, as a kid, I couldn't wear high heels, but my Barbie could. That was exciting, and she didn't mind. She didn't care. Her feet were deformed anyway. And it didn't make me wear high heels, because later in life, I tried them on. I was like, that's actually uncomfortable, and I will go back to showing the high heels, because that's more fun than actual high heels. I did not, but if I did, what am I saying? Anyway, I think that playing with Barbies definitely shaped my fashion sense, or at least it taught me that I like fashion, and it taught me that I like experimenting with fashion, I like trying out different things, I like styling, I like glamour, I like elegance. It taught me all of these things. Now, I don't know what the modern Barbies are trying to teach children in that department, but I'm assuming not much. And this lack of inspiration is especially visible if you compare Barbies to other dolls, like Rainbow High dolls absolutely slay fashion-wise. LOL OMG dolls just serve, despite the weird brand name. Compared to them, Barbies just seem conservative. It's like they're afraid to make them look good. They're afraid to put them in good outfits. Or maybe they just assume that children are not target demographic for fashion, which I disagree with. But But when they do attempt the more risky fashions, they just don't work for me. Like, why are they just so unflattering? What is going on here? Why can't they look good? Bring back hot dolls. That's all I'm saying. Now, one last aspect of it that I just completely don't understand is that we all remember the massive marketing campaign behind the Barbie movie. So we know that Mattel is capable of working with fashion brands, of serving looks, of delving headfirst into the fashion industry. They know the influence that Barbie has on fashion and that fashion has on Barbie, but they only use that influence when it pays off, I feel like. Well, that's a hot take, I know, but when it comes to little girls, who cares? Someone's gonna buy the Barbies anyway. And that's my beef with it. That's my problem, because little girls and little boys deserve good fashion. I don't know what the conclusion of this video is. All I know is something needs to be done, because we're in a Barbie fashion crisis and we need to do something about it. Something needs to be done. Thank you.